Today we're going to talk about reductive drawing, and all that means is that you are, or subtractive drawing, and what it is that you are removing graphite from your page. You can also do it with charcoal too, but the way to do it is to get yourself a nice sharpened 4B pencil, and you're going to cover your sheet in graphite all over. You can also buy, if you get little bits like that, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world, because actually we want as much texture in this as we can. So don't try and make it really smooth and perfect and precise, because we're going to go in different directions too. So just enjoy going in different directions. Allow it to be a bit messy, bit bish bash bosh. Don't worry about it. It'll all come right in the end. Cover the whole sheet. Don't spend too long on it. Don't think too much. Allow it to be messy. And this is a really forgiving way of drawing, which is why we're going to do it. In effect, what we're doing is we're laying down all the shade of our drawing. And the reason we are allowing ourselves to do it in all different directions is because it provides a bit of what we call texture in the drawing. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use an eraser, a rubber. Ideally on the end of a pencil, a white rubber is always best, or it could be on the end of a mechanical pencil. And what we're going to do is use the eraser to draw. We're going to delete off the graphite and create a drawing. So let's do basics first. So if I wanted to do a sphere, I could rub out a sphere. Well, it's actually a circle, isn't it? I'm rubbing out a circle because it's 3D. So rubbing off all the graphite that we've put down, rubbing it all off, get rid of all those little bits of eraser, like that. And we have a white circle. It's not going to be pure white because we've got the graphite underneath. But what we need to do next is we want to make it look more 3D. So even though we just rubbed off some of the shading, we want to put it back in. I'm going to pretend I've got a light coming from that direction. I'm going to put back some shading using the side of my pencil. It's always easier with the side of the pencil. Moving the page to get around that sphere. Don't forget, you can always rotate your page. You don't have to just do it in the same position. Look, much easier if you use one hand to rotate. And I'm moving around the sphere like that. And we're sort of knitting the shade back onto the sphere. And if I go around the shape of it, imagining it is a sphere already, and the shade is wrapping around it, it gives a much better effect. Then I'm going to rub it in. You can always use a pencil blender, which is basically a piece of cardboard that looks like a pencil, but it's made of cardboard, and it helps you blend the graphite together. But I'm just using my finger. You can also use bits of paper. Right, so we've got a wobbly beginnings of a sphere. Okay, now, doesn't look right, so we've got light and dark, but we haven't got anything in between. So what we need to do is think of the value scale. Now, the value scale is a way of measuring shade. If you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, start with 6 is 5. We're going from the darkest section here to the lightest section here. Think of going through these increments of shade, and these are called values. And they're what describe light and shade in your drawing. Now, generally speaking, you should have a minimum of 8 of these, really, to make a drawing start to ping. Most people talk in terms of 9, but 8's okay. Anything less than that, you're not getting enough depth, because it's light and shade that creates depth in your drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the ante over here. I'm going to go much darker. I'm going to go much, much darker, pressing harder, using the side of my pencil. And I'm going to go much darker over this side, because the light doesn't reach this side as much as it does this side. So it's bound to be darker. So I'm going to increase. Now I'm drawing flat because it's on the camera, so excuse it being a bit wobbly, the drawing, but I'm drawing it flat, and I've also got my dog on my lap. So it tends to make things a little bit tricky, but hopefully it won't be too bad. I'm pressing harder. And what I want to do all the time is try and knit it together, back and forth over the existing shading here, so that it builds a bridge between dark to lighter gradually, gradation. That's what we're doing. We want to try and gradate it, graduate it, gradate it. I'm not quite sure what the exact word is, but I think gradation sounds better. Okay, and then you can rub it together, and you can see what's happening is it's starting to feel a little bit more 3D, purely because I've got much more variety of values in the drawing. Now, this is too much of a leap here. It's jumping from here to here. We need to gradate that. Let's have a look. How can we do that? Back and forth, very lightly with the pencil, very, very lightly, so that we're building up from dark to light. Let's rub it together like that. Well, can you see that's starting to look better already, isn't it? If the sphere was on a surface, let's pretend there's a table by doing a line either side, it would have what's called an occlusion shadow at the bottom, which is the darkest point on any object is where it meets the surface of something. If it was a balloon in the air, you wouldn't have that occlusion shadow because it wouldn't be resting on anything. But if you have an occlusion shadow, where it meets the surface of something, that should be the even darker. That should be like the darkest one here. So we can add another one on that. That should be even darker than that one. You don't want too much of it, but just enough to show that it's resting on something. And can you see how that is beginning to be much more spherical because we've used more values? Now, this background's quite useful because it's got a lot of liveliness in. But again, if the light's coming from this side, you probably would have, everything would be a little bit darker behind here because the light wouldn't spread out that far. Now, you are the director of this scene because you're the artist. So you can pretty much decide where you want the light and shade to be. However, it's got to look sort of believable. In Vincent van Gogh's Potato Eaters, which I'll put a picture up for you in this video, he was very much using artistic license for that because the lighting is coming from the oil burning light which is hanging above them. And the light that's cast technically would not fall like it does in that entire picture. But Van Gogh needed it to be how he needed it to be. So he's created the light in a specific way, but it wouldn't have spread that far. It's unlikely that it would have caused those shadows and that amount of light just from that one hanging light. But he's the artist, he can decide how it looks. And why not? If it adds drama and dramatic effect to the drawing, then go for it. Allow yourself to be dramatic with your work. There's nothing wrong with it. And it makes the viewer a little bit more engaged with your work as well. So just to reiterate, in any drawing you do with graphite, and with biro and with pens, you need a range of values, a minimum of 8, ideally 9. You want to go from dark to light within your drawing. Shading should be done with the side of the pencil, and the softer the pencil, the easier it is to shade. An HB is quite difficult to shade with, but a 2B, 4B, etc. are much easier. You can smudge with your finger, you can use a blending stick, or you can use a torn off bit of paper that you just rub over instead. The graphite is non-toxic, so you're totally okay to do with your finger. The only thing is you have to make sure your fingers are not greasy so they don't damage the paper surface. Some people I've known have had, and I've done this once or twice when I've had a commission for a drawing, is I've had a tiny little bit of talc in a little pot next to my drawing so that I can occasionally dip my finger in it and get rid of any grease that potentially could be on my hands. Or alternatively, obviously, I could go and wash them and then make sure they're fully dry before I start interacting with my drawing.